Hey guys, subscribe for daily content, and if you're shopping for gear, make sure you check out the description for the newest items at some of the very best online retailers. There's also links for some of the items that I personally recommend. Thanks!
What's going on YouTube? Metal Complex here, and today I have a very interesting discussion topic to share with you guys. One that I think is something that has needed to be talked about for a long time, and we've kind of touched on it here or there. You guys want to discuss it in my comments. Some other content creators have kind of weighed in on this, but that topic is, what is the modern holy trinity of U.S. knife making? I understand in Metal Complex, back in the day, it was Rick Hinderer, Chris Reeve, and Strider, but a lot of stuff has changed. A lot of you guys want to replace, especially Strider, with somebody else. And there's an infinite amount of discussion surrounding this. I think this is an amazing topic, and we could apply this to many different sections of the industry, but I think first we should talk about the modern small batch U.S. knife makers. Not Spyderco, not Benchmade, not Zero Tolerance. Those are big production companies. We're talking about small shop U.S. knife makers. Some of them dabble in the custom stuff here or there. Yeah, but instead of doing a holy trinity, because that is really impossible, instead of that, we're going to throw that out the window, and we're going to replace that with the 12 Knights of the Round, just because it sounds cool, and boy, does it give me a lot more room. The other great thing about going with the 12 Knights of the Round is, according to Arthurian legend, there are as many as like 1,600 Knights of the Round. A lot of times they focus on a central, like a core 12, right? But it can be extended to however many knights you want, right? So if you don't like my list, then you can just add or replace as you please. We can all do this together because this is all sort of, I guess uncharted territory, right? I want to stress, and I know people are going to fast forward and they're going to miss this context. I want to stress that we are talking about the biggest players currently, right? There are some legacy makers that certainly could have made this list at one point, and people are going to be disappointed that I leave them off. I'm going to talk about that here. There's also going to be people who are not on this list because I've just never experienced one of their knives. But we're talking about currently the biggest movers of products, the ones that people talk about. You love them, you hate them, doesn't matter, they're in your face, you can't ignore them. These are the most prominent players in the game currently, according to Metal Complex. I will link as many of these knives down in the description as I can so that you guys can check these out if you want to. It does help my channel when you use those links, but that's entirely up to you. Thanks to my patrons for supporting me. And please make sure to follow me on Instagram at metal_complex. I own each and every one of the knives that I am putting on this list. I have purchased each and every one of these knives, paid for them in full. So I believe in these products. Starting off here with number 12. Should have listed these. I'm going to try to remember what number I'm on. Yeah, Rick Hinderer is absolutely 1,000%. We're just going to get this one out of the way, guys. Everybody knows I'm a massive Hinderer fan, and even if you're not a massive Hinderer fan, there is no one who can say, oh yeah, Rick Hinderer is not really very popular. There might be some people who say, well yeah, there's a bunch of them now sitting around on retailers. That has to do with demand finally, supply finally catching up to demand. But there are certainly still variations of Hinderer knives, like the non-flipper Fullard Spear, that sell out so fast that even yours truly cannot get their hands on one. That is the truth. I tried to get one, and you guys bought them all. I obviously own this one, but I wanted another one as a user. They sold that quickly. Rick Hinderer knives are absolutely massively prominent in this space, and they also make a really good product. I don't think their heat treatments are always great. Obviously, their edge geometry on some of their blades, right? But again, this isn't really about who's making the most utilitarian or, who's making the most refined, ultra, super, mega slicer 9,000. No, not really. It's about the most prominent makers in this space, which is small batch U.S. knife making. And these are definitively, by the way, if you are new to the knife world, these are definitively made in the USA. It's not like, oh, no one's ever seen the inside of the factory, so it could be outsourced to China. No. These are definitively made within, manufactured, assembled, created in the United States. Moving on here to number 11. Of course, Chris Reeve is still on this list. Why aren't you using your Sebenza? Unfortunately, and I realized this not too long ago, Unfortunately, my Sebenza 31 was one of those knives that was in the NAF's burrito that got lost recently. So I ordered a new one actually right before I started this video. It's a bummer, but I have to have that back, obviously. Sebenza 31, obviously the most prominent. It's one of the most prominent and dominant folding knives in the industry ever. The Sebenza 31 is crazy. Like, people are still absolutely salivating. And it's also probably one of the best tools on this list. A lot of people would argue it is the best tool on this list. But Chris Reeve and now Tim Reeve, they make an incredible product. An incredibly refined product, an incredibly consistent product. One of my favorites, of course, the Umnumzan. I think it's one of the most interesting knives. It's one of the most unique looking knives. Once you see it, you can always, it's like, it kind of has that folding steak knife look. And a lot of people, the more you look at it, you're like, oh, there's other knives that kind of look like that. But then again, it's like, not really. The Umnumzan is the Umnumzan, right? Wonderful, wonderful products. They didn't used to be my favorite products, and they still are not my favorite products, right? They're not for everybody. The big, wide washers don't create for the best, fidgety action, or it's not that. But their frame locks, I mean, this is the father of the frame lock. There's another guy, actually, who created the first frame lock, and then Chris Reeve actually made it what it is. He popularized it and made it what it is, and made it as, dependable. He really made it a super duper dependable lock. And if you've never experienced a Chris Reeve frame lock, you'll understand why people swear by these things. Chris Reeve frame locks are they're in a different league. They almost feel like an entirely different strength tier of product. Versus, a lot of competitor frame locks or the common production frame lock that we see everywhere, right? They're crazy. The tension is insane, and obviously the geometry, wild. Chris Reeve, 1,000% deserves a spot on this list. Moving on here to number 10, one that almost everybody's going to complain about. But again, it's not about who is making the best or most consistent product. We have to talk about who is prominent, who's moving things, who are people talking about. Love this guy, hate this guy, hate him for his past, hate him for his products, whatever. The truth is, we still have to keep Strider on this list too. I own 2 Striders. This is a performance SNG. We talked about this here recently in the Holy Trinity video. Really glad I did that. Glad you guys enjoyed it. This is the most perfect Strider that I own, and it is still plagued with issues. Strider loves to round tips. This one, fortunately, not rounded, but he does love to round tips. I have an SMF with a rounded tip. We have pivot lash. You can hear it. Oh, that sucks. We have detent lash. You can hear it and see it. Yucky poopy. Hate it. The lockup is pretty good. The frame lock feels pretty good. Outside of that, fit and finish is nice. The action's really good. All of that. Boy, the price on these things is absolutely stupid. I don't know who's deciding. It's such an arbitrary pricing thing. And on top of that, they're both scarce and not scarce. And so your pricing is like anywhere from like borderline reasonable direct from Strider when it's something nobody wants and it's just sitting there to absolutely asinine. Like knives like this will sometimes go for as much as $1,500. And if you don't believe me, Arizona Custom Knives, I understand there's markup with the consignment. Arizona Custom Knives regularly sells Strider knives. You can look at recent sold items. You'll see $1,000 to $1,500 for basically nothing more special than a full titanium Hinderer XM18, which in my opinion is a more refined product, right? Yeah, maybe the cutting geometry is not going to be quite as good. But I can tell you what, even with Rick Hinderer not hitting steels like M390 to, by community standards, optimal between 59 and 61 is where he likes to hit it, so the Peters heat treatment. A lot of people, myself included, think 60 plus. Strider has the most, of everybody who's going to be mentioned in this video, Strider has the most random, chaotic HRC numbers. Taylor has tested, and you can check out Taylor's data by clicking on the link at the bottom of my description. Some of these Strider knives are testing, depending on the steel, as low as 55 HRC. And other ones are getting up there, depending on the steel. 60. I think some of the S30V ones are right around 60, which is pretty good. So there's a quality control issue. It is a glaring problem. Glaring. Lots of different things. The only people who are going to tell you that Strider does not have a consistency or quality control issue are people who are diehard Strider fans and just refuse to accept that these are issues, right? And that's something that you'll find is the case with diehard Strider fans, is they will either say that they're all of their Striders are perfect, or that the things that we're calling issues are not actually issues and we're just being crybabies. Whatever. It is what it is. I'm just here to be honest with you guys. Strider is still a prominent player. Even if you don't like him, even if he makes your tummy feel yucky, he's still a prominent player, and nobody can deny that. That's just the truth. Moving on to the far more interesting part of this list. 12, 11, 10. Number 9, Demco, obviously. Everybody's been screaming this. Replace Strider in the Holy Trinity with Demco. Well, as I've been saying, you can't just erase history. History's history. The original Holy Trinity, or the original, right, somebody's going to be like, actually, according to the Bible. Yeah, we're talking about in the context of pocket knives, right? Yeah, you can't just be like, oh, I don't like that, so I'm going to change it. This wasn't like, back when the Holy Trinity was a topic of primary discussion back in the early 2010s, this wasn't like people, like, well, who should it be? It was like very clearly dominated by these three. You can go back on Blade forums and see discussions regarding the Holy Trinity. It always refers to those three. That is set in stone. We don't change that. We simply create a new parameter, right? Demco, obviously by modern standards, 2026 standards, clearly deserves to be on this list at least. And yes, if Demco was this type of player back then, I think it would have easily outclassed both Strider and Hinderer, and really the biggest debate would be who makes a better knife, Demco or Chris Reeve, right? Demco is not like, a lot of people say, oh, like this maker's a lot like if you combine Strider and Chris Reeve, or if you combine Chris Reeve and Rick Hinderer. Demco is Demco. Very clearly leaning into the mega hardcore, ultra high-end, indestructible user. Demco is definitively making the strongest out of everything that's going to be mentioned. These knives are the strongest. The Shark Lock knives, obviously his Triad Lock. He invented the Triad Lock. He also invented the Scorpion Lock. His knives are going to be the strongest. And, I guess if you're just like talking about throwing pocket knives into the most brutal situations, yeah, his are going to be the most dominant there. And that's his claim to fame. Demco knives, are not appealing visually to everybody, but there's nobody, at least nobody of sound mind, who's going to say, oh, Demco doesn't make a knife that's very, very strong. They're not very durable. That is how we identify an idiot. Anybody who says that, you're like, this is an idiot, and then you go on with your day. This Metal Complex guy sure is salty, and he seems a little mean. Welcome to the channel. Yeah, Demco absolutely deserves to be on this list, for sure. Super prominent, makes an incredible product, makes obviously tons of different variations, and not everybody loves his G10 pricing, right? You can get Taiwan-made Demco. Somebody's going to say, Demco knives are made in Taiwan. Yeah, the Taiwan ones are made in Taiwan. But the MG 8020, that's made in the USA. That's why this looks so big. Or the Triple X, right? So yeah, Demco 1000% deserves to be on this list, and no one, I don't think anybody's going to argue with that, that we should be replacing Demco with somebody else on this list. Another one that essentially no one is going to argue about, and this is honestly the knife I was waiting on before I made this video. Koenig. Thank God I finally have one. Right? Honestly, it's just a relief to check this one off the list. I got my 99% perfect Koenig. Beautiful Magna Cut hollow ground blade. We got not exactly the texturing that I was after, but it's my second choice. One of the best on the list in terms of quality control and fit and finish. Koenig, their claim to fame, Bill Koenig, I believe, claim to fame was impossible precision versus the general competition, right? Even when you're comparing Koenig, like some of those bigger Chinese players that were like really starting to be, holy crap, this is impossibly precise. Even then, Koenig was like, hold my beer, I make a better product. And honestly, to this day, that still holds true. Koenig's precision, I think Koenig's precision is really only matched by 2 or 3 more on this list. It's absolutely insane. The consistency and, of course, the contouring, absolutely beautiful. This is such a gorgeous knife, and the Koenig Arius is one that's not going to be mistaken with anything else. The Koenig Arius doesn't look like anything else. Other things look like the Koenig Arius. This is a wonderful product. Super expensive, obviously, just like everything else on this list. But I think that their price is essentially where it should be. And there's no denying that Koenig should be on this list. Definitely at least part of, the metal complex Knights of the Round. And you can, people, other content creators, you can call this whatever you want, right? What I wanted to do was just make enough room for everybody who truly deserved to be on this list. Koenig, wonderful, super cool. Love it. Probably will have to buy another one so that I can keep one safe and clean and then use one. Moving on here, I'm not sure what people will think of this. I think that this, he deserves to be on this list. 12, 11, 10, 9, 8. Number 7, I think still very prominent. Les George. Whether you want to say prominent by his own, in-house US, listen. How often do you see Les George mid-techs or ultra high-end production, whatever? This is the VECP V3. How often do you see these things just sit there? They're gone. They're gone. The moment they drop, they're gone. Les George has his hand in a ton of different collabs and production knives made by, whoever. But when it comes to his US-made stuff, this may not be the most, if you're a big Les George fan, you're going to look at this and go, I know exactly what that is, right? Some of you are going to be going, that looks like that one ZT knife that one time. Yes, because Les George designed it, and actually a number of other knives for ZT. He also does custom knives. So it's just like everybody else in this list, they also do customs, right? Lines get blurred, and people are gonna want to take my list and then split hairs and say, well, actually you can't really include. Well, the way I look at it is it should be like this, or we should actually be included because the custom and they actually do. You can do whatever you want. You don't have to. This is just my list, right? Les George, definitely. This is on washers, and I just caught that frame lock. I just did it twice. Les George, I think, does he make models that run on bearings now? Most of his models run on washers. But pretty much everything he makes in this category is hyper popular. The moment it drops, it's gone. It's also really tricky to get your hands on this stuff, even if you follow. From my perspective, Les George is he's a tricky guy. It's hard to pin down what he's going to do next and when he's going to do it, and where it's going to drop. But these are, he's a famous long-time name and still super prominent. I don't know that everybody would be able to immediately identify all of his models, but they're much more likely to go, I know who that is, or I've heard that name. Definitely. That's 7. Moving on to 6. Undeniable. Undeniable. As long as you are aware of who this is, it is undeniable that they should be on this list. Holt Knives. Holy God. One of the only other knife makers on this list whose precision truly matches up, and some people would say it exceeds, Koenig. Absolutely, excuse me, I had an energy drink before I started this, if you can't tell. Absolutely wonderful. Some people say Holt Knives are boring. Other people say Holt Knives are amazing. They're beautiful, iconic, right? I tend to be part of the latter group. This is an outlaw. The one that definitely took Holt Knives to the moon was the Spectre. There's also the Morpheus and I think a couple of other things. But the Spectre, it's the only other model that I'm personally interested in owning. But this Outlaw, which is basically just a giant Spectre, is amazing. Action, incredible. Precision, incredible. Very expensive products. Can be tricky to get a hold of exactly what you're wanting to get. They also use a lipped detent system, which is, depending on who you talk to, is kind of like a frowned upon kind of thing, right? But this is something that was a bigger deal when it first started occurring, and now it's kind of blown over, and it's just been accepted, right? But the reality is that there was never a patent taken out on the lip detent system. So the reason why, just to give credit where it's due, the reason, if you've ever handled a Holt and go, God, these things flip nice. That feels different. Holt's doing something special. credit to Holt for making a really precision product, but that lip detent system came from Brian Nadeau. Like, let's just be clear about that. That's where it came from, okay? Wasn't patented, so I guess fair game. Frowned upon, I guess, depending on who you talk to. My perspective is we just call it like it is and we move forward, right? This was, the lip detent system came from Brian Nadeau. But anyways, yeah, 1,000% deserving of this list. I feel like number 5 here, everybody's going to agree with me. I think the people who won't agree are people who've never experienced. That's the big thing. If you say, if you're going to go to the comments and say, oh, that one shouldn't be in there because it looks boring. My guess is the type of person who says that is the type of person who's handled essentially none of these. And if you've not handled or experienced any of these, then what potency are you adding to the discussion? You're looking at these things through a rectangle and saying, I like how that one looks, or I don't like how that one looks, so it shouldn't be on the list. There's nothing there that is of value. It's perfectly fine to have your own opinion, but when your opinion is based on essentially nothing, there's no value to that opinion, right? So it's like I always say, people are, of course, entitled to their own opinion, but you are also not immune to other people telling you that your opinion has no value, right? That's just part of that. If we're gonna enter this space with that, the Oz Machine Company, Roosevelt, in this case the XL, or Oz Machine Company in general. A lot of people look at this and go, it's boring. Okay, certain knives will look boring to certain people, and that's fine if you think that. But the reality of it is that an Oz Machine Company knife is ridiculously nice. Ridiculously nice. Simple, straightforward, sure. This one is a great example of their ability to contour. Yes, it is contoured. Lightly, but it is contoured. Contoured titanium. A straightforward build, but about as precise as it can possibly be. They're great performers, but their consistency is boom, 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 consistent. But again, we're talking a little bit about, what I like about the builds. We're talking a little bit of what I like about the performance and the consistency, right? Just because that's natural. It's a natural part of this conversation. But as far as prominence, just like Holt, there is no denying it. An Oz Machine Company knife dropping at any retailer right now, it's going to sell. Yeah, you'll see them on the secondary market. They're pretty pricey and people have kind of slowed down on buying them there. But as far as, demand, what people talk about, what people reference, every single knife so far on this list, it's all they've referenced. Love or hate, referenced, talked about, spotlight. Oz Machine Company, absolutely. There's no denying it. And very few people are going to leave Oz Machine Company off of a list of the most prominent 12. Not the greatest of all time based on legacy. This is something that people are going to get mixed up. You should have included this person because of legacy. Legacies can be huge, right? Past popularity can be huge, and if they fall off and they're nowhere near as prominent, then they don't really meet the criteria for this list. But again, we're going to talk more about that. Moving on here to number 4. This is going to be absolutely 1,000 outside of Strider. This is going to be the number 1 most controversial take. But remember what the rules are. Remember what the criteria is. Medford knives. I don't like Greg Medford. That doesn't matter. It's perfectly reasonable for you to not like him for a number of reasons, right? That's fine. I don't review people, I review knives. So if you don't like somebody, I think that's perfectly fine. And let me tell you, Greg has done a great job of giving everybody reasons not to like him. There is no denying it. If you're a big Greg Medford fan, well, here's the truth. Greg Medford fans love it when people cry about Greg Medford. Every time you cry about everything that Greg Medford has ever done that makes you feel yucky in your tummy, a Greg Medford angel gets its wings. They are just laughing. They are laughing at you every single time. On the flip side of that, people who don't like Greg Medford, they've got good reasons to not like him. It's perfectly valid. Both of these things that I'm saying are true, right? People want me to, it's like, well, which side of the fence to use it? I don't have to. I can just review the knife and just tell you the reality of it, right? Constantly complaining about it and crying about it and whining about it. Yeah, you're getting the Medford guys to laugh at you. But at the same time, not buying his products because you don't like his personality, his behavior, whatever, it's also completely and totally valid. And it's also probably the best way to, express that frustration is to simply, if you really don't like it, then just don't buy the product, right? But love him or hate him, right? Love him or hate him. No one can deny that he is a prominent figure. Certain Medford knives don't fly off the shelves. Certain Medford knives absolutely fly off the shelves. Greg Medford has one of the biggest, he might actually have the biggest facility. I don't know if it's Medford or Chris Reeve or Hinderer, I would venture to guess. Those are going to probably be the largest facilities. I would say, or shop. Let's not say facility. Let's say shop. Medford is also probably the most... There's more videos about the inner workings of Medford knives and how they're made and who's involved. Like, there's more videos on Medford stuff than probably anybody else. Here's the truth. As somebody who, is an enjoyer of Medford knives, let's put it that way. I like his knives. His earlier stuff was, yikes, wow. That was some freaking banging rocks together kind of products, and they evolved slowly, and he got better and better. And gosh, his modern, this knife is probably, 4 years old now. This is a nice product. His finish work is good. His consistency and the edge is good. He's got a number of products that are not big, clunky, super bricks, right? They're not always the most comfortable. They're not always the most, sensible ergonomically. I mean, this thing's got a lock bar that's just super painful to manipulate. And of course, the Medford guys and Greg himself will say, well, toughen up, Cupcake. You got to, that's what we make our knives for tough guys. And if you can't manipulate them, then you're not a tough guy. It's something along those lines, right? Whatever. Medford knives, I think a lot of them are cool, and I think a lot of his designs are just stupid. I don't like them, right? But that's what it comes down to. Either way, no matter how you look at it, Greg Medford is one of the most prominent players in this space, for sure. Moving on. This is a beloved, I don't think I've ever heard someone say, I don't like Serge Panchenko. Like him as a person, right? I don't think anybody's ever said that they just don't like. I think some people say I don't like how his knives look, right? I gotta tell you, as far as everybody on this list, who is the least likely to care if someone doesn't like how his knives look? I've talked with him many, many times. You cannot affect Serge Panchenko. You can't, by saying that he said you don't like his stuff or you don't like, he's not even aware. He's just on to the next thing, right? Serge Panchenko makes some super cool and probably the most unique looking stuff on this list. Mega high quality. He does the mid-tech and custom thing. He collaborates with Hawk using, in this case, it's like the Hawk lock with the toggle D10, I think is what's on here. So cool. This is the Rook. Absolutely wonderful. His cleavery stuff, a lot of people who, like when the cleaver craze was happening, that was 2019 or so. The COVID cleaver craze. There's cleaver blades everywhere. And Serge was like, yeah, I've been doing that for a while. Serge was doing that before, during, and still continues to do the cleavery, blade afterwards. And he's really one of the only people who does that. It's still, people still really enjoy it, right? We don't see a big tidal wave of cleaver blade. That kind of, what was that Gerber flat iron that everyone was like, oh. Hawk Knives. I'm sorry, Serge Panchenko. Incredible product. Incredible products. Awesome guy. His stuff flies off the shelves when it's available. He also makes weird, he makes the coin claw and a number of other things. The bean, right? Probably definitely the most unique, but also not a fringe player. Serge Panchenko has been around for a long time. It's very unlikely you've not heard his name. Very influential, He gets people to pay attention. You hear his name, the name's a little different, you see his products, and then you don't forget about him. Definitely. Here's another one that cannot be not included. This is, we're down to number 2. 12, 11, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2. Skiff. Skiff made blades. Holy crap. Skiff is probably, when we're talking about some of these that creep up over $1,000, a lot of them I'm like, yeah, it's really, really nice, but you're clearly just like, I'm a big deal, so I'm going to charge a little more. And they're all doing it. All of them are. But these are big boys. Big boys can say, sorry you don't like it, that's what it costs, right? And sometimes it makes us mad. It makes us feel yucky in our tummies. I keep saying that. But there's nothing you can really do. Now, I'm not saying like that all of this stuff can be made for $50 and be sold for $100. If you think that, I would say don't type that into a comment and leave it as if it's like knowledge or wisdom. Don't do that, because it's not. You're just going to tell everybody that you don't know what you're talking about. You're going to say, I'm guessing. It's a big neon sign. You're going to say, I'm guessing and I don't know and I'm mad. It's not going to convince anybody. If you're watching this video, I can promise you, you are amongst tons and tons and tons of people who have been educated in this, vicinity, this like educated players of this, this hobby, this industry, all of this for like decades. So don't kick down the doors with your guesswork. Don't do that. Now, are they marked up a bit? Sure. As far as the ones who feel the most appropriate, yeah, probably Skiff. I feel like Skiff is like this. You handle one of these, you see it, you experience it. It feels different. It looks different. His aura, his design language, his presentation is different. It feels special amongst the other players. Not in the same way that Koenig feels special. It's a different kind of special. We cannot do this list without Skiff. These knives, to say that they fly off the shelves when they're available is putting it lightly. I mean, this is one of those makers who a lot of times he's like, you got to have a lottery like just to be able to buy one of his knives, right? And there are still people who do that. We're going to bring up some other names later that were not on this list. And the lotteries are basically like, oh, you won. And then it's like, nobody wants it, right? Sad truth. But when it comes to Skiff, there are people literally, well, I mean, I don't know literally, but people kicking down doors to get these things. I own 2 of them. I feel lucky enough to get 2 of them. Occasionally, they will drop on a retail site, but they're gone like immediately. Skiff made blades, absolutely incredible and absolutely worth the money. Not to say that, a lot of these other ones on the list are not worth the money. But it's really, again, not necessarily about who makes the most performance-oriented product or the best product by whatever standard. It's who's the most prominent. Skiff. I mean, you probably heard Skiff bearings. That's a different, I think that's his son. Is it? I always forget. It's a different company, but it's the same. It's family, right? But the knives are wonderful. Skiff has to be on this list. And finally, number 1, Hawk. Has to. Made famous by the Hawk Deadlock. That's a custom. Well, technically, we call it a custom, and it's certainly in custom pricing territory, right? The original Hawk Deadlock, the first, truly first, zero blade play OTF. Famous. This one was in John Wick 4. Absolutely incredible. Overpriced? Yeah, I think so. But I don't think that a product like this could be made and sold for less than about $1,300 to $1,500. You ain't gonna pay that. You're gonna pay a lot more than that, right? But Hawk, super prominent. Undeniable. Hawk, everybody knows. Everybody knows about the Hawk Deadlock. Super prominent. The spotlight of recent controversies with Microtech, etc., etc., etc. No denying it. There's not even really that much to talk about. They make an incredibly precision product. They are OTF makers, right? And I feel like that's kind of like a really difficult thing to do consistently and properly. And then on top of that, they have this proprietary system that allows for the blade to truly have no blade play and still function and, deploy and lock out. Unbelievable tools, by the way. I still EDC my aluminum one. This is a Save Queen, the John Wick 4 edition. Serial number 4, by the way. Yes, serial number 4. Very cool. You left one out. I can't believe you, Metal Complex. You left one out, one obvious one. We thought for sure you would include this guy. You're right. This is now because I say so, and just to prove my point about being able to alter this list from the 12 nights of the round to the 17 nights of the round, or the 846 nights of the round. You can do whatever you want with it. We're gonna change this to the 13 nights of the round because you can't do this without Brian Nadeau. That's a custom knife maker. If we're talking about how these things are all made and what type of space this person occupies, this is a small batch U.S. knife maker. Small shop. Using machines, custom elements, in many cases hand elements, depending on how custom or crazy these get. But that's for all of these makers do that. They all do that. This is an arch nemesis. This is a highly machine-made arch nemesis. It probably does have some hand elements like sharpening, right? Assembly, tuning, all of that stuff. But largely, small batch made by machine. The arch nemesis itself is what really grabs everybody's attention. Once you see this knife, it is then unmistakable. The arch nemesis is the arch nemesis. It's also like a crazy. The way that this is designed is insane. You actually have a central pivot with a properly tuned detent, which, by the way, is the lip detent. That came from Brian Nadeau. That's this guy, Sharp by Design. And then we have a fully symmetrical design with an actual dagger, a folding dagger that doesn't look like hot whale vomit. Let's be real. Other folding daggers exist. Most of them look like super duper poopy. They are super duper poopers, and I don't like them. They look poopy, yucky, hate them. Dumb looking. They're just a little goofy. The arch nemesis somehow was created, and it looks awesome. It looks just freaking perfect, man. I own 2 of these. They're hard to get. They are extremely expensive. If you're gonna pay north of $1,500 for a small shop American machine-made knife, it's really just gonna be Brian Nadeau stuff that I'm gonna say it's absolutely worth it. And believe me, you can get well into the multi-thousands with him, right? But something like this knife right here is going to run you, I think the base price of these, what is it? Is it $1,600, $1,700, $1,800, right? There's a lot more effort that goes into an arch nemesis than a lot of this other stuff. In fact, most of this, outside of maybe the Hawk, there's a lot more effort that goes into something like this. Prominent? Absolutely. Sharp by Design's name is everywhere. They do a ton of collaborations. We're going to get at least one guy who says, Sharp by Design, those are made by Riyadh. Yeah, the Riyadh ones are made by Riyadh. The ones where he collaborated with Riyadh, but he makes his own, right? His name got out there through his U.S. customs, and namely, you could say the Typhoon, but it's the arch nemesis. Probably the most unique, aside from Serge Panchenko stuff, the most unique looking knife on this list. 1,000%. Brian Nadeau, incredible. Hyper precision, some of the most perfect. As far as how much complexity, this is a double hollow ground blade. Compound hollow ground blade. Think about that. And it is perfect. Both of the arch nemesis I have are perfect. Absolute, complete, and total perfection. They're wonderful. We'll always love Brian Nadeau's stuff. Now, let's talk about some ones that I didn't include on this list. But the reason that they're not, because you can say well, if you can make it a top 13, just make it a top 18 or a top 19 and include them. These are the ones that I really wanted to say I feel like are undeniable. We're going to limit it to 12 plus 1 for me because I'm the special boy and this is my special little rectangle where I make the rules. These are the ones that I think are the most prominent players, right? If we're trying to evolve past the whole Holy Trinity thing and make a fair list, these are the players that I feel like are the most undeniably dominant. They are grabbing the most attention. They are the most popular for positive or negative reasons, but these are the dominant players. Other makers, we could also, maybe some honorable mentions or some that you guys are probably shocked I didn't include. Grimsmo. You're right, but they're not as popular anymore. They're not that big of a name anymore. You know them, but they're not doing as much. The Norseman isn't nearly as popular as it used to be, and everybody who's on that list, you do the same thing that I do. It's like, congrats, you won. It's your turn to get one because these, This system was in place back when they were so popular that they had to have a lottery system and randomly select people for the opportunity to buy one. Well, now we all get that opportunity and we go, nah. One day I'll own one. I will. They're just not nearly as popular, and they don't make a lot of new. They don't do a lot of new models. So yeah, like definitely making really nice stuff. It's not about who makes the nicest product or who used to make the most popular product. It's about who currently makes the most popular and influential, the ones that are grabbing the most attention, right? Brown knives. Also, some people probably would say, oh, Brown should be on there, not Les George, or Brown should be on there, not Strider. He's not as popular anymore. Whatever. Brown makes a really good product, and I can understand why somebody would want him on this list. Machine-wise, I think they're too new. Machine-wise makes a great product. They're just too new. So they don't have that... like, ooh, they're making that. They haven't really, the Sonora was good, the Mojave was good. They haven't, I think that if they are destined to have that, like an anchor dropping design, it has yet to happen. But when it does, maybe they'll be one of the bigger players, right? Emerson knives. Let's be honest about Emerson. A lot of people are like, Emerson should have been in the original Holy Trinity. Emerson developed the wave feature. It's tactical, this or that. Number one, even Emerson fans, you guys gotta admit, his knives are not known for being like the nicest. They're G10 and 154, right? And it's their base. I mean, they are about as 2008 as it gets. And they have not really changed all that much. Now, there are still like major, like there's still people that are like majorly obsessed with Emerson. But not to the level of anything else that was shown on this list. And here's the other thing. I've never actually, outside of one kind of beat up one at a gun show one time, which may or may not have even been real, I've never even handled one. I've never really reviewed it. I'm not really super interested in Emerson. I understand they had a big impact. Ernest Emerson had an enormous impact on the knife industry. And to this day, whenever there's a wave feature, somebody in the comments wants to go, I know who designed that is Ernest Emerson. Like, they want to be you got people topple over each other to be the first one to say it, even though everybody knows, right? It's like the Damascus guy. Actually, it's Woods. Everybody knows, right? So current prominence and, like a big top player, I don't think so. But I think other people would beg to differ and say like he's the most prominent of all time. Not from my perspective, but maybe from yours. And so it's fair to at least bring him up. Spartan blades. They make a really good product, the Spartan Harsey for sure. I just don't think they're quite as big a name as everybody else on this list, right? If we were to expand this into the top 20, sure, Spartan. Not for the list that I've created and the parameters that I've created here, which is pretty arbitrary. I mean, some of it's arbitrary. Like the numbering is arbitrary. Curtis knives. Used to be bigger, Curtis is a great example of, and this is, I'm not trying to insult Curtis, because I really enjoy the look of Curtis knives. Okay, I've reviewed them before. I'm just going off a list here. But in fact, we can bring these guys back out so we have something to actually look at while we're doing this. Curtis Knives is a great example of that knife maker that you forgot about. And that sounds really mean, but that's the truth. A lot of people just forget about Curtis knives. People who love Curtis knives don't forget about them, but people who are just generally interested in knives and are just, kind of like aware, educating themselves on various US-made products. You've heard of Curtis, but there's a good chance you just forgot that he existed. And that's kind of to my point that the prominence element is just not there, right? I'm going to get these together. So Curtis, worth bringing up, and certainly, made the top 20 list of people who made an impact at one point, maybe a top 30, Curtis, right? You can expand it as much as you want. Here's a big one. I put a big asterisk by this. Terzwola. A lot of people are like, you are an evil person and you're an idiot for not including Terzwola. I think that this is a fair thing to say. Terzwola literally wrote the book on the modern tactical folding knife, and a lot of people would say that Terzwola is the single most influential, knife maker in this space. I think a lot of knife makers, a lot of these guys will be like, why is Terzwola not here with our listing? Number one, I've never actually handled a real Terzuola, so I have a personal kind of. I mean, even though it's like, well, what is that? You could say, what does that matter, Metal Complex? Your own. This video is not based on. You yourself said it's not based on who makes the best product. It's, who's had the biggest impact. I also have not like delved into the Terzuola world enough to really say one way or another. He's obviously a big name. Most people know who he is. How prominent is he currently? I mean, he has a lot of production collabs. But as far as like, how often is our part of the community or just the entire knife world altogether going, Terzuola? Oh yeah, I've heard of Terzuola. Terzuola is a name I think like that is going to ring a bell with a lot of people and then be completely like, who? Especially newer people, you're not going to know. Newer people, you say, who's Rick Hinderer or Chris Reeve? A lot of them are still going to know, right? Even if you're like almost brand new. You walk through the door and there's a bunch of names that are kind of thrown at you, in this world, and Terzuola is not one of the first ones. So, should he be on this list? I think that this is probably the most potent. If you're going to get mad at me for one of these, it's probably Terzuola, right? In that case, I say, make it a top 14 and put him in there yourself, right? This is just from my perspective. Nick Schuprin, I like Nick Schuprin's stuff a lot. It's incredible. If you don't know who Nick Schuprin is, I mean, I'm putting this name on here because Nick Schuprin's knives really, he deserves to be more well known than he is. Incredible product. He's been in the space for a long time. People just don't know who he is, right? And there's like 50 more names. If you're saying you're going to mention Nick Schuprin and not this guy, you guys are going to get mad at me for all these names that I'm not mentioning, right? But here's the problem. Look at this. This is a 45-minute video. It'll go on too long. The other weird one, and basically I put this guy on my notepad over here to the left, and I put a question mark by it because I don't even know if it makes sense to put him on here. I don't even know where to place him. He's an oddball. Tony Marfione. See, it's kind of weird. Is Tony Marfione? Tony Marfione is almost like he exists in his own weird universe that's stuck out of time. He's the head of Microtech. Those are production knives, entirely separate from what we're talking about. He has knives that are made in this space, not by him. In fact, knives that are actually made by Tony Marfione are incredibly rare. Even Tony Marfione customs are not made by Tony Marfione in a lot of cases. Did you know that? If you have a Tony Marfione custom, there's a chance he never even was in the same room as that thing. Maybe he's involved in sharpening. I can't imagine that he's hand sharp. You look at all these retail sites and you see all these Tony Marfione customs that are sitting on those retail sites for thousands and thousands of dollars. I have a hard time believing that he touched every single one of those. And I don't know. I've heard that there's the majority of Marfione knives are not actually made by him. They are custom made and they have his name on it, but they're made by people who are in his employ. Under his employ. So, but also all of those details aside, you could be like, I don't like him. He's a mean guy and he's been married too many times or whatever. Who cares? People always bring that up, like his life outside of not. Who cares? Yeah, you can like him or not like him, whatever. He exists in a totally unique space. He exists in the Tony Marfione universe. I don't know if we put him on this list or if we even made, let's say we made a list of the top 1,600. There's not even that many. I don't even know if we put, Tony Marfione is like, if you're going to make a list, it's like a top 1 list. And it's like the top 1 Tony Marfione knives that have ever Tony Marfioned. And then the list is the Tony Marfione. I don't know how to fit him in. Like, he is a knife maker, but it just doesn't feel like we're talking about the same thing. He's also a much larger entity. He's substantially larger. I think his size alone has put him in a totally different league. So I don't know, right? Now, there's a million other makers. Some people are going to miss the point of this entirely, and you're going to be naming names that are not even U.S. knife makers. Some of you guys are going to be naming people who are not really, it's more of a smaller production facility, right? And there's going to be a lot of hair splitting, and that's perfectly fine. I'm not going to change my list of 13 here, but I do welcome discussion surrounding what you think they should be, or whether it should be expanded into a list of 20, and which 20 that you would put in here. You can tell me who you thought I might have left out, But my reason for leaving one person out or another is number one, first and foremost, I don't think that they're prominent enough to be on this list. And number two, sometimes I may not have experienced them or the community surrounding them. I don't really have any insight as far as the impact that they have made on the knife industry, and therefore I can't blindly place them, right? So let me know what you think of my list as far as the criteria I set, right? Again, I'm sure that many of you will be like, the criteria was wrong, you should change it. And my answer to you is no, I'm not going to do that. As far as the criteria that I laid out here, what do you think of my choices? That's what I'd like to hear about. That's going to be it for me today. I'll link as many of these down in the description as I can. Please make sure to follow me on Instagram at metal_complex. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like. If you'd like to check out my other content, I do, of course, have lots of videos of knives that are either expensive or inexpensive that I do or don't like, so check those out. And if you enjoy all my content, go ahead and click on that Metal Complex logo right there and subscribe because there's definitely more coming. Thanks again for watching, everybody, and have a great day.